Ecosystems and populations. No organism exists alone. Earth is part of an intricately linked system of living and non-living elements. One organism provides nutrients for another, and another, and another. In 1866, the German biologist Ernst Haeckel gave a name to the study of how organisms fit into their environment. He called it ecology, the study of the relationships between organisms and their physical environment. Soil, water, weather, etc. is called ecology. Ecologists study not only how organisms act together, but also how they are adapted to their environments. Ecosystems. The biosphere is that area of the Earth where life exists. Because the biosphere is too complex to study, ecologists have broken the biosphere down into regions that are more easily studied. The largest ecological units of the biosphere are called biomes. Biomes are large areas categorized by temperature and precipitation. However, even biomes are too large and complex to study. Biomes can be broken down into smaller units known as an ecosystem. An ecosystem is an area within a biome that has unique characteristics that make it different from the other parts of the biome. For example, a lake in the middle of a temperate deciduous forest is a unique ecosystem. Other parts of the biome don't have that much water in one place. Because of this, there will be different organisms living there than in the rest of the biome. However, it is important to remember that no location is ever completely isolated from the other places around it. Plants and animals do not recognize boundaries. The main components of an ecosystem are the abiotic, non-living, factors and the biotic, living, factors. The biotic factors are then broken down to populations. Abiotic factors. Abiotic factors in an ecosystem include sunlight, precipitation, temperature, the slope and drainage of the land, and the chemistry of soils and of the atmosphere. These physical factors interact with one another. For example, a season of heavy rains can cause a river to flood its banks, depositing sediments on nearby land. When the river recedes, when the floodwaters recede, the sediments will have changed the soil composition. Other interactions of abiotic factors can produce more dramatic results. A river can completely change course, or volcanic activity can suddenly create a mountain or an island. Biotic factors. Biotic factors in an ecosystem include all the living organisms. Biotic factors are broken down into smaller ecological units called populations. A population is all the members of a species that live in the same area. For example, all the moose on Isle Royale, a national park in Lake Superior, constitute a population. They interact with each other and with other populations on the island. Abiotic and biotic interactions. In an ecosystem, there is continuous interaction of the parts. The biotic factors are interacting with each other, the abiotic factors are interacting, and the abiotic factors are interacting with the biotic factors. For example, a lightning strike starts a fire, which is an abiotic interaction. The fire burns up the grasses in the ecosystem, which is a biotic-abiotic interaction. The grasses fed a population of deer. Without food, the deer population drops off, a biotic interaction. Additionally, climate and soil conditions determine which plants will live in a certain area. Plant life, in turn, affects the distribution of animals. The grass that grows in Siberia must withstand that region's cold, dry climate. The teeth and digestive system of the Saggia antelope are adapted for eating this grass. In contrast, deer that reside in the wetter forests of the eastern United States are adapted for browsing on the leaves and the trees that are found there. Living organisms also affect abiotic factors. For example, plants replenish oxygen in the atmosphere by the process of photosynthesis. The interaction of biotic and abiotic factors results in the great diversity of ecosystems in the biosphere. Populations. Ecologists study populations to determine the structure of an ecosystem. Ecologists first determine the number of organisms living in the ecosystem. Then they determine if the population is growing larger, smaller, or staying the same. A change in a population is called population growth. The population growth rate is the change in the number of individuals in a population over time. This rate is determined by using the formula shown in the illustration. Population growth is calculated by the change in number of individuals divided by time equals population growth rate. Biotic potential. The biotic potential of a population is the rate at which a population will grow if all individuals survive and reproduce at maximum capacity. Biotic potential can be reached when organisms capable of reproducing are put into an ideal environment, one with unlimited resources and space and without such hazards as disease and predators. The high reproductive capability of the common housefly, Musca domesticus, can be used as an example of how biotic potential can be achieved. One housefly produces 120 eggs in 1 year. How many houseflies can be produced in 7 generations? If each fly lives only 1 generation, if half the eggs of each generation are female, and if each female produces 120 eggs in total, a total of 5,598,720,000,000 flies will result. Limiting factors. In nature, populations rarely achieve their biotic potential for any sustained period. Eventually, the number of individuals levels off. This happens because limiting factors in an ecosystem control the growth of a population. For example, forest managers often introduce trout into lakes that contain no large fish. Because the trout have no competition for food or space, their population grows rapidly, but only for a while. The number of fish soon becomes so great that competition between trout for food and space ensues. This competition results in a decline in the number of trout. Once a balance is reached between the number of individuals and the amount of resources available, this decline ceases, and the population becomes stable. Limiting factors that only act on a population when it becomes large are called density-dependent limiting factors. Food, space, and predation are examples of this type of factor. Limiting factors that act on a population regardless of size are called density-independent limiting factors. An annual flood that kills all plants along a riverbank is a density-independent limiting factor. It will kill any plant along the bank. Growth curves. A useful tool for studying the patterns of population growth is the growth curve. A growth curve is a graph showing the number of individuals in a population over time. The J-shaped curve. The J-shaped curve is a growth curve that tracks 2 phases of population growth, the lag phase and the exponential phase. During the lag phase, little or no increase occurs in a population. For example, When only one male and female sunfish are introduced into a fertile pond, the sunfish population increases slowly because only one female is producing young. However, as more females are born and in turn reproduce, the rate of population growth increases. If there is enough food and space for the sunfish to thrive, the population will eventually increase at an exponential rate. During the exponential phase, a population increases so rapidly that the number of individuals doubles in a specific time interval and keeps doubling in increasingly shorter periods of time. The S-shaped curve. An S-shaped curve is a growth curve that depicts the period of relative stability in a population that occurs after its lag and exponential phases. This curve, therefore, gives an indication of the carrying capacity of the ecosystem. The carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals that the ecosystem is capable of supporting. When the environment is stable, the maximum numbers of individuals in a population fluctuates near the carrying capacity of the environment. If the environment becomes unstable, the fluctuations become more radical. For example, high in the Rocky Mountains, the size of the butterfly population is usually stable, although it may vary somewhat with available food and space. However, freak snowstorms sometimes cause a sudden drop in the number of individuals. Nevertheless, because the number of butterflies is then well under the carrying capacity of the ecosystem, the population usually increases quickly until it again approaches the carrying capacity. References for this reading are Curtis and Barnes, Invitation to Biology, published by Worth Publishers, Incorporated in 1981. Number 2, Tolley, Modern Biology, published by Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston in 1989. 3, Johnson and Raven, Biology, Principles and Explorations, published by Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston in 1996.